me? I don't know. We'll find out in a minute. Welcome to the Hoff Time Report. We're going to talk about how the left is losing here in Idaho, but they're not down and out yet. Stay tuned.
This is the Hoff Time Report with Idaho Freedom Foundation President Wayne Hoffman, one of Idaho's most respected, influential public policy voices.
I can't believe I made that work right. This is the first time I've done this on my own. So I'm not going to guarantee that it's all going to go beautifully, but hopefully a little grace, it'll go just fine. Welcome to the program. It's good to be back. I'm here at the office today and just checking in with the staff and meeting with our supporters and, just causing general mischief. And I'm hoping that if you guys have questions, feel free to ask in the chat. I've got the chat box up and I got my reading glasses on so I can see what the heck is being said. But the topic of today's program is how the left is losing. And they are. And it's one of those things where I think it's sort of important to remind folks that, I remember where we were um, 15 years ago when Bill Sally was in Congress, and it looked like there was a good possibility that he wasn't going to win re-election. And at that point in time, I kind of suspected that the conservative movement had been put back about 20 years. And then we created the Freedom Foundation, and we've been doing a lot of work to promote free market, limited government ideas, and they've taken off like a rocket ship. And it's not just that the ideas have taken off, it's that I think the timing was just right in terms of just how people wanted to see some real leadership that wasn't tied to a political party or a politician. They wanted to see things change, that our country isn't where it needs to be, and Idaho should be leading out. We have a state that is very Republican. The electorate is, I'd say, very independent slash conservative, if you want to put a nonpartisan label on it. They vote Republican because the Republicans are offering to promote conservative principles, right? And so that's the direction that people have gone. But the politicians haven't necessarily been conservative. There's been a quiet détente between the leftist Republicans and the establishment Republicans and the leftist Democrats for ages, and has resulted in government growing, becoming more intrusive. I was listening to a broadcast the other day where I don't remember who was speaking. I'll think of it here in a minute. But the commentary was that up through about the early 1920s, your involvement with the government, your relationship with the government, your interaction with the government was basically walking into a post office, and that was about it. And now everything you do involves government, everything. The size of the windows in my office, the number of hours I get to work before it's overtime, the number of vacation days in a lot of states that are determined by the government, the amount of money that comes out of my paycheck for retirement determined by the government, both the lower end and the upper end. Obviously, tax policy, the things I must do to enter the occupation of my choice, and of course, the entire education system is government for the most part, and uh, and the left has gotten away with controlling the debate in Idaho by this, like I said, weird détente between the establishment Republicans and the Democrats. The Republicans run around or have run around for years and years saying that they're conservatives. Look at me, I voted pro-life on a bill, and I voted in support of the Second Amendment. And then if you question them severely enough, the politicians will say, well, I hate Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. And don't you hate those guys too? And you nod your head and go, well, yeah, I do. So we must be on the same page. And the trick in the legislature has been not only that, but also the way in which the legislature's website is configured. You can look up your legislator's voting record. Good luck on that. Go to the legislature's website. If you haven't done this, try this. Go to the legislature's website tonight or tomorrow and look up. You have two representatives and a senator. Go look up their voting records. You can't. That's by design. You can go online and you can look at every single bill, but you can't look up the aggregate sum total of a legislator's voting record. You can do that on the Freedom Foundation's webpage. You can go to idahofreedom.org and look at the Freedom Index, and you can look up not only the scored index votes, but you can look at a legislator's complete voting record. There's nowhere else really you can do that. And so, we try to make it simple, not just because we wanted, more transparency, but we wanted people to recognize that their legislators weren't voting conservative. So if you go back in time and you look at the place where we started in 2009, and look at the votes back then, the government was growing. It was a Republican-controlled legislature. It's been growing government since the 1960s. And that's the reason. That's the reason why we have the problems that we have, is as the Republican-controlled legislature that's been growing government, not the Democrats. But the Democrats have been sitting behind the Republicans quietly and gleefully as government has grown. So in recent years, all this has changed, and it's changed extraordinarily for the better. The transparency that we've injected into the process using the Freedom Index and the scores and the bill analysis, that's been really marvelous. It's changed the debate. And it has caused people to start asking a lot of questions that they didn't ask before about the efficacy of a Republican legislature. And I point this out because, a lot of people will say to me, well, Wayne, we just have to get through this next election cycle. Okay, well, why do you have to get through the next election cycle? Well, because with the next election cycle, we're going to elect a Republican-controlled House and Congress, and we'll maybe elect a Republican-controlled U.S. Senate. And thanks, Maria. Thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate it. And we're really delighted to have Ron on our team too, and Seth, thank you too for your emojis. But what's going to happen if you have a Republican-controlled Congress, a U.S. Senate, U.S. House? Nothing's going to happen. That's the answer. I mean, look at what happened when Donald Trump became president, and finally Congress had a chance to repeal Obamacare and send a copy to the president for his signature. They wouldn't do it. I mean, they voted for repealing Obamacare many times when it didn't have a chance when Obama was the president. And then, Trump becomes president and suddenly they don't have the wherewithal to pass anything. So Congress isn't your answer. Your answer really is at the state level. And I don't want to spoil anything for the folks, but a little spoiler alert, Ron Nate is writing a little article about Article 5, because the other thing people will say to me is, well, maybe if we pass an Article 5, we'll do a convention of states and we'll fix everything. But, the reality is that the ability to fix everything has always been in the hands of the state legislatures all along. And so you don't have to change the Constitution. You just have to have a state legislature that does the right thing. And we've just not been doing that. And now we're pointing that stuff out. And the awareness of where things have gone awry is through the roof. I travel around the state and people are they're more knowledgeable now than they've ever been. They used to talk to me all the time about Congress and Washington D.C. and Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and they still talk about that stuff. But now they're really asking a lot of detailed questions about what's going on at the state level, things they never asked about before, and that's why you're starting to see the shift in both the state legislature. We're going to have a fairly conservative House of Representatives. I would say that we're probably down 1 or 2 seats net in the House, but we're really miles ahead in the state Senate. So I mean, and then really see the sea change in just the way the state Republican Party operated at the convention last week. That was amazing. And think about just how far we've come there. When the legislature was being changed internally, and we saw more conservatives being elected to the legislature, that really didn't resonate fully with the grassroots in the party. But I don't know. You tell me. Look at what happened at the state convention. You elected a true conservative in Dorothy Moon, and most of the Central Committee, Executive Committee, is conservative, which is true. We've never been in this place before. It is a sea change. It is amazing. And so when I say the left is losing, that's what I'm trying to get people to understand, is that they are. But this is a process that takes time. And I see in some of the comments, if they're getting smarter, why they reelect little, because they're not. It takes time, and we still need a bit more time. You're seeing the change really taking place, for the most part, in Western Idaho, from about Eagle up through the Panhandle to Bonners Ferry. That's where the change has primarily taken place. You're seeing central committees that recognize that. I mean, they used to kind of think of themselves, to use a sports ball metaphor, and I'm very bad at these. They thought of themselves as kind of the cheer squad for the Republican Party. And now they go, wait a minute, we're not for the ball team, if you will, the Republican Party. We're the cheer squad for the football team. And now they're kind of viewing themselves as the team owners, and they're wondering why their star quarterbacks haven't scored touchdown in quite a while. So it's transitional. You're seeing it in the western part of the state. You're also seeing it in certain aspects of southern and eastern Idaho. And for the first time ever, a conservative was elected to the legislature from the Magic Valley area. That's Glenita Zuderfeld. And so what an amazing thing. So the left is losing its control. They no longer have the allies that they used to have in the legislature and elsewhere. And I always kind of wondered, yeah, people would say something like, he has a crestfallen face. And I never, what does that mean, crestfallen face? What does that mean? When I walk around downtown Boise, now I know, because I see a lot of lobbyists with crestfallen faces, because they know what's going to happen in the next legislative session is going to be very, very different from what happened in all the preceding legislative sessions. Consider that the House is about the same in terms of conservative complement as it was previously. I know a lot of folks will look at it and they'll go, oh, we lost some really good people, Ron Nate and Kerry Hanks and Greg Furch and Chad Christensen, but we gained a lot of really good people too. I'm not going to name them all because I don't want to give it all away, but there are some incoming legislators who I've met with that are dynamite, that they're really extraordinary, very conservative statesmen and stateswomen who are just incredible voices for Idaho. And so the House has not changed really that much in terms of the makeup of the body in conservative versus leftist. But the state Senate, wow. So a lot of the things that passed for normal in every legislative session are going to be hard to get done. I mean, I imagine a fight on, yet again, on the public television budget, I imagine a fight on um, the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, whether the state taxpayers should be subsidizing national public radio, because it is, whether Boise State University's budget, University of Idaho's budget, Idaho State University's budget should be passed without any consideration for getting rid of the social justice stuff. Um, Things like, in Idaho, there's some of this stuff you may already know, but in case you don't, chime in the chat. Let me know if you already know this stuff. Did you know that in Idaho, the labor unions, the fire and teachers unions, have a collective bargaining right? The local government entity must negotiate with them. In some states, public collective bargaining is illegal because even FDR recognized that you shouldn't have you shouldn't have the uh, employees of the government agency operating on both sides of the bargaining table, and that's what we have here. So that's a law that can be fixed. We've been trying for ages. I mean, I'd say the better part of the last 25 years, there have been efforts to allow school boards at least the ability to say no to collective bargaining. And instead of saying the school board shall negotiate with the labor union, we're going to say the school board may negotiate with the labor union. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing? Um, I always ask people when I go around, I say things like, how many of you give money to the Conservation League or the Sierra Club? I'll ask in the chat, and you guys can say whether you give any money to the Conservation League or the Sierra Club. And of course, no one will raise their hand. No one. But everyone should, because in state law, when you pay your electric bill, a portion of that money goes into a fund at the State Public Utilities Commission, and the leftist organizations tap into that fund whenever they have a rate, R-A-T-E, rate case in front of the Public Utilities Commission. Basically, you and I, as ratepayers, pay for the lawyers of the Sierra Club and the Conservation League. That's an Idaho state law. So, I mean, it's really incredible. But there are a lot of other things like that. I mean, if you go and you look at the organizations that Idaho taxpayers fund. I wrote an article about this a few weeks ago that, you, the taxpayer, are helping subsidize pride events throughout the state. That includes the one that happened in Coeur d'Alene last month, the one that's going to be held in Boise, I think in August or September. We pay for those because it comes from a public fund in the state treasury. And why we're doing that beats the hell out of me, but we do it. So there's a lot of stuff to be working on. And in the past, when budgets came up in the Senate, almost unanimously pass. Unanimously. I mean, maybe you'll have one or two no votes. Those no votes went away with the defeat, or not the defeat, but the retirements of Christy Zitto and Regina Baer. They were pretty much the only two folks that would vote no, and sometimes Steve Vick. But they're gone. Now we've got 12 people, at least 12 people replacing them. So it's going to be a very, very different universe. And all I can say about this is what this is going to do more than anything is expose this detente that had been occurring between the leftist Republicans and the liberal Democrats, where they kind of keep their angst on the QT and they vote for bigger government together, and then they both go home, and the Democrats complain that they didn't get a minimum wage increase passed, and the Republicans pat themselves on the back for passing some pro-life legislation. But they all grew government. They grew government together, and this is what has the left absolutely unhinged. And so you see this in the commentaries in the newspaper. There was one, and I think if you watched Brian Hyde's Nowhere to Hide program yesterday, he talked about this, just the coverage coming out of the Statesman, where they basically said that the conservatives who have taken over the Republican Party are evil and hateful and awful. Truly, they are scared. This is not vengeful behavior on the part of the leftists in the media or in the Democrat Party or even in the among the establishment of the Republican Party. This is out and out fear. The left is losing Idaho. They've had control forever, and now they're very worried that things that they never had to talk about, things that they allowed to kind of fly under the radar, they're in danger. They're in real danger of being unwound. And by the way, the reason why this is important, and I mentioned this enough, I don't know that I've said it on one of these streams, but I'll say it. Every state in America is socialist. Every state in America is socialist. I did not stutter. That is a true fact that every state has adopted various vestiges of socialism, and they don't need to. There's no federal law. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says the state of Idaho has to run a Medicaid program. But did you know that there's never actually been a hearing over the 40, 50 years that we've had Medicaid in place on whether that program works, is legitimate? If you read a column that I wrote earlier this week, I think it was Monday, it says, it quotes from Thomas Sowell. And Tom Sowell says, there's there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And it's important to point that out. I used the example of the legislature passing and the governor signing a $66 million behavioral health program for Idaho. They're going to expand behavioral health. By the way, you need to read the column for all the details, but basically behavioral health is the new code word for mental health services. And that could be, I'm depressed, or I have anxiety, or I'm on drugs, or I'm suicidal. It captures the gamut of things. $66 million, and they use the word investment. There's no such thing. You're just taking money from people who earned it and giving it to people who didn't, to run a program that's never actually going to do the things that they say they're going to do. And so, it'd be very, very easy for state lawmakers to say, listen, this is not how this works. This doesn't solve problems. All it does is take money from people who need it, who could use it on their own to solve their own problems, or people who have means, giving it to a charity, and that charity can use it to help people solve their problems, and they would do it so much better than any of the programs that the state of Idaho could pass. And the same thing is true for the Medicaid programs, not authorized by the Constitution, as Tunnel Lord points out. And so what a legislature ought to do is say, wait a minute, there's no authorization for Medicaid in the U.S. Constitution. So sending us $3 billion to go spend on Medicaid is just condoning an activity that's not authorized by the U.S. Constitution. Simple, done. And then what you can do is you can save all that money, and it goes back into the private sector, so the private sector can do what it has always done and help people. And the reason that I bring all this up is that, I'm sorry, I missed a comment about the home loan programs. I'm sorry. Put that back in the chat, and I'll try to pick it back up again. So I'm sorry I missed it, but I'll pick it back up if you I can't seem to see it in the scroll. But what we're doing is we're having these really, really detailed conversations about the proper role of government. And that is scaring the heck out of a lot of people. The left has been able to control Idaho quietly because they've done it under the vestiges of Republican control in the legislature and in the executive branch. And now the veil has come off. It's kind of, not to quote from Warren Buffett, because he's kind of a creep, but he says something about finances, that when the economy is bad, it's kind of like when the tide goes out and you can see everybody swimming naked. Well, in this case, the tide has come out, and now you can see who the true conservatives are and who the people are who are going to defend bigger and badder government. The numbers of those people are fewer and farther between. And so now we think there's going to be many more votes on the floor of the House and the Senate on issues that the Senate has been able to avoid voting on. And it's not just the stuff that you saw in the past, like the bill that bans schools and libraries from handing out pornography, the bill that bans state actors from operating on so-called trans kids, which doesn't really exist. Another story for another day, I guess. But it's a lot more. It's on, who's going to put up with these big entitlement programs? Who's going to put up with these state agencies that don't do anything in these programs that merely rob people of their wealth? There's going to be a lot of stuff that hasn't come to any kind of discussion. Yeah, Seth, I'm sorry about Mr. Ship. I'm sorry, Congressman Simpson. Nothing I can do about that for another couple of years. So just hang in there, because it is a pain in the butt. Yeah, Kendall, ESG is a real concern, and legislature needs to take that very seriously. It's not hard, by the way. It's simply a function of not not subsidizing these companies and organizations that insist on judging you by your environmental or social, or your giving to various leftist causes. And the state of Idaho has been extremely helpful in facilitating the transfer of money to leftist organizations for years. And I think that it's only fair that we start viewing it through the other lens and saying we're not going to start putting scores on people, or having state agencies double check. Somebody told me that there was an agency. I haven't had a chance to verify this, but there was some agency that was apparently scoring contractors based on ESG. They weren't doing it publicly, and they weren't doing it in some way where it was easily trackable. But for some reason, this agency, like I said, have to check it out, had accepted a contractor because they were more ESG inclined than another contractor. So it's still happening, and there is a way to stop it. You just have to have a legislature that's willing to take on those tough issues. And by the way, it's not just ESG. By the way, it's also states that continue to play the equity and inclusion game. I'm sorry, state agencies that are playing that game. The critical race theory stuff they're still doing. Funding the leftist enterprises, from National Public Radio to the Conservation League to the Sierra Club. Funding Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood still gets money from the state of Idaho. There are a lot of groups out there that are truly wicked and out to destroy America, and we put money into their wallets. You can get here's another racket. You get continuing education credits if you take courses with the Idaho ACLU, or with I forget who some of these other ones are, but some of these lefty groups. All you have to do is attend one of their meetings, and they benefit, and you benefit, because you get continuing education credits, and you can continue to do the business that you were doing. What's this about the Idaho Housing and Finance Association? Yeah, that's a racket. The Workforce Housing Fund, truly one of the worst bills to pass last legislative session, and that just adds to the evil that is the Idaho Housing and Finance Association, which apparently, when it was devised in the 70s, was supposed to help address affordable housing. How did that work for us? Not very well. So anyway, oh, and somebody sent me this today, which was, I'm going to look this up real fast so I can get this to you so you're aware of this. I have not had a chance to further research what this is about, but this morning I got a text and it said, yeah, the Department of Health and Welfare, Division of Public Health seeks a full-time limited service health program specialist with exceptional coordination and communication skills to support the Healthy Equity initiatives in Idaho. And that's in there. I never heard of this Bureau of Equity and Strategic Partnerships. Equity. You know, you'd expect it in Illinois, right? But here it is in Idaho. So again, this stuff has been going on a long time, and they've gotten away with it. And yeah, yeah. Thank you, Tunnel Lord. Yeah, yes, the homeless population was the one they were trying to deal with back in the 70s. You're right. I guess affordable housing came later. Nonetheless, they've not been able to. It hasn't worked, right? It hasn't. It hasn't done anything. It's only made problems worse. And so they've added this other component onto it as if that's somehow going to help. And I say the same thing over and over again. These programs don't work. And Thomas Sowell is correct. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And the trade-offs here have been extreme in terms of what they've done to our economy. The government is what's ruined the availability of affordable housing. The government is what's ruined the availability of affordable health care. The government is what's ruined the availability of roads and bridges that are not in disrepair. I mean, they have caused almost every problem that you can point to has been caused by government. The high cost of child care, the high cost of groceries, the high cost of college tuition. I mean, college tuition is a great example, by the way, look how the government has simply just made those programs cost more money, way outpacing inflation. And they're still never satisfied with the amount of money they're going. All this to say that we have opened up a plethora of policy issues that has the left scared to death, and so they're losing. They are losing, and so it's easy to look at, the legislative races that we did lose and think, "Woe is me," or that leftist Republicans won the governor's office and the Secretary of State's office and um, so on. But in reality, I mean, you've got a more conservative attorney general than you've had in ever. That's huge. Um, so we are making headway, and that we're making headway in just how up in arms the folks on the left are, and it's really just a beautiful thing to see. We do have some things planned. I don't want to reveal too much, but there are some other things that we're doing to try to make sure that the outcomes are going to be favorable in the 2023 legislative session. So we're being more strategic. We're also talking to people. We've had a lot of people call us to ask us about running for the legislature in 2024. So there are people who are looking out ahead across the horizon and trying to see what needs to happen. Before I go, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Reclaim Idaho. I saw that come up in the chat. And there are just a couple things that I want to make sure people are aware of and that they're focused in on as we get into the November election. And for those of you who aren't aware, thank you, Seth. For those of you who prying is what yes, that will happen. For those of you who aren't aware, on the November ballot, there will be a ballot initiative. It will be Proposition 1. And Proposition 1 is called the Quality Education Act. As if adding the word quality is somehow going to make it true. But what the Quality Education Act would do is raise create a new top marginal top income tax bracket for everyone earning over $250,000 a year. Now, when you just say it that way, people go, "Oh, the rich, they're going to pay more money." what it would do is it would increase their tax by 82%. It's almost doubling. Um, and you've probably seen some graphics on our Twitter feed and maybe on Facebook where it shows that Idaho's tax policy would actually be worse than California's, worse than New York, worse than New Jersey. And that's kind of concerning, right? But it gets worse than that. Actually, what the proposal does is it raises taxes on everybody, because the proposal would, remember last legislative session, the legislature lowered the tax threshold, that the marginal rate from 6.5% to 6. And if Reclaim Idaho's petition, if their ballot initiative passes, it would actually reinstate the 6.5 rate. And the current top marginal rate kicks in at about $11,000 or $12,000. So you're not talking about the rich for people who are earning, $12,000. It raises taxes on everybody, and so it is diabolical. It's a huge concern. I know that on social media and elsewhere, maybe by email, there's a survey going around in which Reclaim Idaho is asking for opinions on some of the messages that they're planning to use in the November election. And I hope you'll take time to fill that out and just screw with Reclaim's polling. Get them the worst messages to support and make them crazy, because they're going to try every way they can to sell the initiative as being a tax cut, or being a windfall for schools because they badly need the money and all that kind of stuff. But it's a real problem, because this is how good states start going downhill, when you start passing tax policy by initiative. I would argue that that initiative is unconstitutional, because you shouldn't be able to pass tax policy by ballot initiative. Idaho's constitution specifically says that tax policy is supposed to start in the Idaho House of Representatives. And in this case, that's not the case. So I think we've got a really good message. But as you talk to people about Reclaim Idaho's ballot initiative, be sure that people understand that it raises taxes 82%, not just on the wealthy, but on small businesses also, on mom and pop grocery stores and restaurants and auto mechanics. They are all going to pay that higher tax rate, because they're all making more than $250,000 a year. So everyone needs to understand that their small businesses are going to hurt big time, but also that it raises taxes on everybody else. Also, everybody who had a who got a tax break in with the 2022 legislative session, all that's going to revert, and your taxes are going to go back up. Any other thoughts out there, folks? Because we've been on for like 38 minutes, and I've run out of things to talk about. I've got more next week. I've actually written an article on the state's Medicaid system and the transgender agenda, which I'll talk about that on the next podcast on Tuesday. So be watching for that. But I really appreciate you all. Okay, give me 1 + 2 = 2 genders. Yeah, I would say that's probably true. Near as I can tell, not 145 or whatever the number is. Anyway, really appreciate you folks. Really appreciate the warm facts. I'll be back, the warm thoughts. We'll be back here again on Tuesday. We'll talk about Medicaid and the transgender agenda, and maybe some other things that may happen between now and then. But just keep remembering and tell your friends. We are winning. The left has gone crazy, and what we're doing here, this exercise, is not just an effort to save Idaho from socialism. It's an effort to save America from socialism, to make each of these states that have adopted socialism into laboratories for liberty, not laboratories for democracy, because that's evil. Laboratories for liberty, which is something I think our founders really wanted, but haven't seen in oh so many years. So thank you again for believing in us, for supporting our work, for tuning in tonight. Be sure to, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or wherever, to like this feed and to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And look forward to seeing you next time. And I'll see if I can hit the outro, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
You've been listening to the Hoff Time Report with Wayne Hoffman. Be sure to visit idahofreedom.org for Wayne's articles, IFF research, and show notes from today's episode.